thanks everybody for joining. Today we're going to talk about ethics of AI and people analytics and separating the BS from reality. We're going to start by having a brief recap of HR tech. And so let me just kind of get forward to there. So, hey, this is what welcomed us when we got there at the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, and this was a couple of weeks ago. So, attendance was a bit lower on the delegate side. A lot of big vendors were there, and also there was a really cool set of startups. Met a lot of people there. Some people we know and haven't seen in a while, and also some new folks. So Phil, I figured we could just highlight which things we each saw and noticed there at HR Tech. Share that with folks since they probably weren't able to attend.
That sounds great. Do you want me to go first, Nick?
Yeah, why don't you go first?
Sounds good. Sounds good. And first off, just, hats off to the folks who put on HR Tech. Obviously a tough year, but it was really cool just to have the conference back and to be able to go there. I think everyone did absolutely as best they could do while trying to stay safe and keep things going. So that was fantastic. My view of the conference was primarily in the expo hall with the other vendors. And so looking around, I think the big takeaways there, there's always a ton of recruiting stuff at HR Tech. So that was the same. Gem, Phenon people, he had huge booths, and they were kind of talking about recruiting tech. A lot of ATS vendors there as well. I did take a chance to go through the startup kind of pavilion area, which is always great, and kind of see what's coming next. I think that the big trends were recruiting always, but then, diversity and inclusion, and people are trying to think of software that can help with that. That was interesting to see. And then simultaneously, a huge push for AI and machine learning. And I think, as we go through the talk today, it's interesting to think about the intersection of those two trends, because on one hand, it's great that companies are investing in means to achieve, representation, inclusion, and other outcomes in their organizations. At the same time, all of this machine learning stuff could come in and potentially really derail some of those initiatives if not handled carefully. And so I think that might be an interesting theme to weave in today as well. So a couple of takeaways from my side. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the ubiquity or ubiquitousness of AI in the tech provider. So walking through and talking with some of the larger providers, and then also in the various presentations. So it was good because I think it was really it made the presentation that I had the opportunity to deliver there pretty fitting. It caused me to think in a bit wider lens about people analytics and about the team. And not just about the people analytics elements of or the ethics in people analytics, but the ethics in HR technology more broadly, and what the role of people analytics is going to be. And I believe, and I'll touch on this a little bit later as well, but I think that the HR tech is purchased by a lot of different members of the HR team. You mentioned the recruiting team. Of course, there's a lot of different things that they're being pitched and purchasing. There's comp, there's general HR, there's talent management, there's all these pieces, and they all have elements of AI and machine learning. And so I think that with that wave happening, I think it's time to say, who's going to keep an eye on the ethical stance of our HR department? So if you're, for that organization, the people in HR, they're most likely to have data scientists that can understand that stuff, is going to be the people analytics team. And if that team doesn't have somebody, then it's going to have to be somebody else. So I'll touch on that a little bit later as we go through, but that was really what stuck out to me. And I think it was what was resonating the most in the presentation that was at the Tech Talk stage. Yeah. So, well, let's walk into it. Just what I'm going to do today is share the pages and the presentation that we delivered there, and taking your questions along the way. There's going to be an opportunity for some prizes. We have some giveaways. So if you answer questions correctly, this is a book. Oh yeah, there's two books. If you can see our video, yeah. So there's the Explore People Analytics book, which is something that I co-authored with Heather Whiteman. It is not a a product pitch. It's actually a piece of thought leadership that One Model and Future Workplace sponsored. And then Weapons of Math Destruction by Kathy O'Neill. And so we're ready to give those out. So be ready with the chat window open. And I'm going to get that chat window open on my screen as well, so I can see, because if you answer correctly on certain questions, you will potentially win something. All right.
You want to be in there quick. Exactly.
Be ready. Quick,
be ready
yes.
On the keyboard.
Yeah. So let's go. What's going on with AI is, and this is from Gartner, and I removed all the, or I got a version that did not have all the different parts of AI together, but they're all kind of clustered around here. There's different pieces of AI technology that are just about peaking on this curve, right? This is the hype curve, and so you go through this peak of inflated expectations. You come through this trough of disillusionment, and then you start to get this productivity. So we're really kind of entering peak right now, and that also means like peak purchasing, and so it's time for us to really, or it's the last opportunities to really be on top of what's happening in this world of AI inside HR. And what I think this comes down to is these black boxes. This is the biggest fear I have in this kind of ominous looking picture. But what is each one of these black boxes doing that's sitting inside your HR tech stack? Are we buying this stuff because we think, hey, this is really complex, this is cool, it's ingenious, and so on? We're not talking about buying automobiles here. We're talking about buying technology that affects our workforce, affects people, affects their lives. And I don't know that there's anything, the ethics of a Tesla or something, but there's definitely ethical considerations that need to be made about the technology that's in your HR tech stack. So, do you know how each one of these things work? And when I was thinking through this, I just had this song lyric jump into my head, which is, don't criticize what you can't understand. And I think that's more like, don't deploy what you can't understand. By the way, if anybody knows the song that this lyric comes from, first person might win something. You have to put it into the chat. So don't see anyone in there yet. So I will say,
okay, wait, we got people in the Q&A. That's probably what audience members can see. So Q&A is fine.
Q&A, that'll work.
We have working class hero. As you guys said, I don't think that's correct.
It's
Bob Dylan. Correct. Yes, it is Bob Dylan.
It is Bob Dylan.
That's coming in the chat. Okay. Anyone got the song reference?
Times are changing. All right. Well done.
All right.
So there you go. So you're the first winner. So Braden, we'll make sure we catch up with you afterward.
Well done.
So who owns the AI models that are sitting inside there? And this is what you need to be considering: who's legally liable for these? Who decides what's ethical? And the answer is your organization is legally liable. I don't think you're going to be able to go to court and say, well, it's Phenom People, not to pick on them, but it's Phenom People, or it's one of these other vendors, it's Greenhouse's issue, or Eightfold AI, it's their algorithm, we just deployed it. No, it doesn't work like that. And especially when in the world of like finding deep pockets, you're going to be liable if something should go wrong with those algorithms. And then in terms of what's ethical, that's going to be your organization's decision. What's legal is decided by the law of the jurisdictions you're in. But what's ethical is a little bit different, and that's going to be decided by your organization. So you have to be getting ahead of this stuff. And let's look at an example. Now, this example from Amazon is about how they had to disclose the algorithms that were being used to judge worker productivity. And California is now requiring this. So what are they requiring? They're not saying the algorithm is outlawed, but they're requiring transparency. And transparency is something that is not readily available in almost everything that I saw at HR Tech. You're not going to get under the covers and be able to understand the models that are at work. So long, we really, this, by the way, this came out September 26th. So this is just like 3 weeks ago. It was, I think, 2 days before HR Tech when this news story hit. And so, all right, maybe it's great. They're going to disclose their algorithms. But you have to think, this is a consumer brand and this is a reputational ding. It's not going to collapse Amazon, but this is the kind of thing that, over time, I think we're going to see more and more of these things. And it's going to be about the algorithms and the AI and ML that is in these products. And just to be like super clear, we at One Model are not at all against AI and ML. What we're talking about is the ethics and how to do this ethically with transparency and watching the inputs and the outputs of those models closely, being able to share it, be transparent with customers. So this is kind of the setup. So, think about the reputational risk. All right, so now we're gonna have a quick round of game time. And we already held up the books. So those are the two books. You will get a package with those books if you answer for the person who answers most rapidly. So for this, I'm actually going to have my notes in front of me because I want to make sure I get these hypothetical situations down right. Okay, and there's poker chips here because at the presentation, which was in Vegas, I had the opportunity to toss poker chips out to the crowd, but today you get books anyway. If I sent you a Mandalay Bay casino chip, it'd probably be worth about nothing until you spent money on an airfare. So, all right, so first one, round one, attrition forecast. All right, so the model that has been built to forecast attrition uses age, gender, job role history, education level, and a bunch of other data elements. And it predicts with 95% accuracy, according to the team or the vendor, whether someone is going to leave the organization within the next 12 months. So that's the model. Great. The outcome and the impact is that some managers have started to use this to determine who should be selected for leadership training. Now, think about the manager's perspective. Why am I going to send someone to this expensive leadership training that they're going to bill me for if the person is not likely to be here in 12 months? So the managers start using it in that way. Question, is it ethical? Not ethical, Josh Elmore. Okay, great. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, correct. I would agree with you. Let's say that, because ethics is not always such a clear thing. So, and likely illegal. Yeah, I think it could be. And so what is to be done here, and how did this kind of get off the rails? So this is where you have a piece of AI ML modeling that's integrated into some of the data you're sharing. But it's the deployment and the usage and how people are trained on what to do with this. And then how are you checking on it? Because you might have a manager just joined. You might have done a great job with all the 150 managers that have access to this, but then 3 more just started last week. So how are you onboarding people in to use the stuff that you're delivering correctly? So you have to think about this. This is where you get into like a product mindset. You have to think about how are people using this product in the field or in the wild, so to speak. So again, this is going to require all of you in people analytics to think about how are we deploying, how are we training people, and how are we monitoring the usage. So well done. Phil, maybe you can note down who just are big winners. Let's go to round 2. All right, so again, I'm going to reference notes so I don't mess up the hypothetical. So a career path recommender. So this is, this model that's created to present the employees with career path ideas, potential jobs. It does not use gender as a factor in the recommendations. However, an analysis post-introduction of this solution found that the recommendations are steering women toward career paths that are less technical and also therefore with lower compensation potential. So is that an ethical situation for you? Is it ethical? I would agree. I think that you can kind of getting the hang of this. All right. So what, that I would say that's the easy question. The harder one, which is what do we do about it? What should we do about it? How are we going to manage this? And look, I've been involved in tools like this being developed and deployed. And this is some number of years ago. And I think now we're better suited. We understand this landscape better, and we have different tools available. So what to do? One, the always test for bias in the outcomes. I mean, you also have to test for bias on the inbound data. Like, are we modeling against a biased set of data or a set of data that represents a biased set of processes? But then on the outbound data, testing for bias. This is going to require some extra work and a human lens, but it is really, in order to stay consistent with your organization's ethics, which need to be defined, in order to stay consistent with that, you're going to need to do that extra work. So these things can't be just introduced and then celebrate success that we got it out there. In the first case, you needed to watch how it was being used. The second case, we needed to do some testing on the results that were being kicked out. Okay, last one, round 3, is this ethical? So you may know that we recently released a labor market intel product that has labor market data. So we were close in on a situation like this, and I want to share it with you. So, but this is a hypothetical. This is not from our solution. Labor market data tool shows that software app developer talent in market A is more diverse than in market B. Okay, so the software app developer talent in market A is more diverse than the talent in market B. So as an outcome, the diversity recruiting resources are steered toward market A. So they're going to put more effort in recruiting in market A than market B. However, in reality, market A and market B are statistically insignificant in terms of the difference. Let's just consider them equally diverse. So the metrics in the tool were based on interpolations of BLS data and or name to gender algorithms that make assumptions about individuals' genders and then roll that stuff up. So again, the tool said that market A is more diverse, but in reality, the model is kind of skewing, and it's actually they're equal. So is that, checking the time, is that ethical to use that? Amanda Fletcher, thank you. Not ethical. This is a little bit more subtle, because how does this work? So what you end up with is you have the opportunities for the diverse talent in market. Just stupid. Okay, but the opportunities for diverse talent in market B are going to be reduced by using that model. I think the not unethical, just stupid. Well, it's actually, I think it is steering and is creating an outcome that is not ethical. It is creating that situation. So there's, I think, what we have to keep in mind is there's a lot of tools that are out there that are putting this data right into the front end technology, into recruiting software and things like that. And so how is that modeling being done? So what to do in this situation? This is a big one where you have to just go ask the vendor, how are diversity estimates being developed and deployed into the technology? Is it a combination of government sources, scraping data? What kind of modeling? If it's modeled, if there's estimations being made, exactly how is that being done? Not just, oh, well, we use AI and ML to make estimations on that talent pool. You can't stop there. That's a surface answer. Maybe that's sufficient for kind of initial sales call, but you're going to need to dig deeper. So again, this stuff is not just in the kind of people analytics tool sets. This market data is being baked in, to lots of different tools. So again, keep an eye out for it. All right.
And none of these examples, Nick, are far-fetched at all. You mentioned this is, something we were kind of doing some researching on in this most recent one, but all of them easily come up. And with, to your point, with people all over the organization potentially investing in tools, people are going to be looking at numbers on shiny dashboards and assuming they have significance, and it's scary.
Mm-hmm. You know, and Robert asked a really good question, Phil, which is, what if the model has bias, but it's less biased than the current, let's say, human-driven practices? So what's the comparison against? Are we going against perfection, or is it an improvement on the current state? This is the where ethics becomes quite fuzzy. I'll give you my opinion on this. If you systematically introduce this and it's going to be consistently delivering bias into a system, I would be concerned about that. If you know that the existing human patterns already have that bias, you end up in a tough spot, because you're going to be introducing something that is going to do wrong, but you have this other situation that things have been kind of going wrong already. It's a tough call. If you do make the decision to go with it based on that type of assumption, I think what I would do is to have really rigorous documentation of, look, this is the bias we found in the existing processes. This is the bias we see, which is less in our modeling, and this is how we're going to continue to monitor and improve the modeling. So I would have something documented that says this is the ethical framework within which we made a decision to move forward. So I think that's where you get into having a little bit of like a governance council.
Yeah, and there's no safety in not knowing, I think, is part of it. I think that there's a feeling when you're about to dig into some of this stuff that you don't know what you're going to find. And once you find something, now you know it, and you're sort of legally accountable for knowing it. And I think that causes people to hesitate on the threshold of some of these issues. But, if you're at a reasonably large size organization, you have a legal team, go talk to them. That's what they're there for. No one's going to be, I think, upset for digging in as long as you do it the right way. Don't just let it fester, I think that's what sometimes people do by default, is they'll say, we know it's a little biased today, but if we formally go after it, to your point, Nick, now we're very conscious of it, and we're documenting that we're conscious of it. And that is a little bit of a threshold you cross, but it's worse not to cross the threshold.
Yeah, I agree with that. So here's one of the tips that we offered to the folks that were attending there and sharing it with you, is to be friends with your data scientist. Now, some of you may have someone qualified in your immediate team. Others might have to go to your product team, your marketing team, or elsewhere. But the best situation is you're going to find someone inside your organization that can be useful in breaking down what is being provided by vendor technology. So if you need someone to help analyze that, someone who's going to understand the model construction, the training data, ask the tough questions, find that person. I also think that if your organization just flat out does not have a person that is capable of that, then you really should be thinking whether you should have this technology employed or not. I would say no. I think there is maybe an option to go after maybe external independent data scientists that can help you do some evaluation like that. But then again, you're taking, instead of taking the vendor's word, now you're taking someone else's word, although they're going to be accountable to you. So basically you need to have somebody on your side who can dig in really deeply into the models. And so you can be comfortable that what's in your tech stack is following your own ethics. So speaking about the ethics you have, at a really high level, what are our values? What matters? Is there ethics in our process? How are we doing this? How are we going about our various processes? And those processes include, like, if you're developing your own models, is our process of model development consistent with our ethics? Are we having ethical checkpoints along the way as we develop products that are going to be used inside our organization? And when I say products, I mean like an attrition forecast or a career path recommender, or any of those types of things that you're going to build, to have checkpoints along the way, and then checking the outcomes. So is it consistent? Is the outcome or are the outcomes consistent with our ethics? Just going just a little bit further into this, and then we're going to in a minute turn over and take a look at how we proceed to be ethical and transparent. So explainable and understandable. So in people analytics, you're building models, you're deploying analytics products. You need to be able to explain the model and the results to HR teams, to managers, and ideally to employees, right? So you want to have that be something that you can explain. So you have to practice the language of translation from some of the more technical things into things that the broader audience can understand, because they deserve to know what is behind the scenes. And then the traceable and measurable, being able to reproduce the results, to explain the results that were deployed in any given model over time, to be able to monitor those and measure them, to measure the performance, to look for data drift, to look for model degradation over time. So this just really fundamental stuff that you have to be able to deliver, whether you built the model or not. If it's from a vendor, it's the same thing. You need to be able to understand it. It needs to be traceable and measurable. You need to be able to say, how did this person get recommended with that role? And there should be a breadcrumb trail that you can chase through. If not, then you really, then that's a definition of a black box. So we put humans in the middle of the building of the process and the deployment of it. That's going to be one of the key things, is that you have opportunities to have humans reviewing what's going on, looking for the patterns where is the model building something that's not consistent? Is it using data points that we don't think it should be using? So how do we have humans involved in that, intervening at points to deselect various features, to turn off features, turn things on, so that what is coming out is going to be more consistent with what we believe. Let me just hit Robert's comment. Yeah, having a formal governance process that is looking at this, and I think to Robert's point, is sort of maintaining a portfolio approach. We have approval, maintenance, backtesting is what Robert said, and that's exactly the kind of practices that need to be included. Look, it's going to raise the burden on your people analytics teams. It's going to make it a little bit more challenging. It's going to make it a little bit more costly to do this. But the cost of not doing it is not just the risk, to your organization or to you personally, but it's really going to take the whole realm of these advantages of technology that we can deploy in HR and kind of shred them to pieces, because there'll be a lot of collateral damage if these things start to go wrong. So, where we're coming from at One Model is setting a kind of ethical bar, setting it high, challenging ourselves, challenging the other vendors in this space and the practitioners to really meet a high bar in how they're doing this, so that we can all proceed. I mean, this is basically a bit of future proofing. If we don't do this, the law is going to catch up, and we're going to have to go backtracking on a whole bunch of things that we've done. So a couple of pointers. I think some of you already are doing this. I think based on Robert's comment, setting an ethics charter, having governance, monitoring the portfolio, and make sure that your insights and solutions are augmenting human decisions. And this is how you introduce them to people: augmenting, not replacing human decisions. So when you deliver a forecast, how is it being used to help inform the decision makers? We're not, we don't want to replace people altogether. We want to make them better, smarter, faster, more efficient. But where I think some of the technology is built on a premise that you're going to be able to remove headcount from things, I would rather see us looking at technology that's making us make better, smarter decisions and doing it in an ethical way. So we're going to take a quick look at One AI, which is, in One Model, we have our machine learning model builder. And, we're going to show this to you because we want you to see what transparency looks like. So you're not going to get a full demo. You're not going to get a product pitch. What you're going to get is a look behind the scenes at how we do this. And again, what we think that you should be expecting from other tools. So I think, Phil, I'll do the slide clicking if you
Sure.
want to kind of take us through this.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we're just going to show some screenshots from our solution, and I'm hoping that the takeaway, like Nick said, is to take, you know, the good intentions, the high level questions, and to just show you some concrete examples of what some solutions might look like if they were implemented. And to take this as a first example, what you're seeing is within a solution, we have a list of all of the predictive models that are being run. So there's sort of a catalog, it's filterable, and you can see all of that on the left-hand side. Each slice of this is a different predictive model pointed at a different target variable along the way. Now, what's important, we've called out here is if you look at the circle in the upper right, is every single time we run this model. So here we're trying to predict days to fill. We've given it a naming convention. It's the second go round trying to do this. We're pulling in a bunch of data about our requisitions. And you can see the timestamps for every time we kicked off the pipeline to attempt to build a predictive model around this data. And all the data treatments and statistics are stored within each of these run. So I can click in on pending, I can click in on deployed, I can see all of the features that we used, I can see the actual modeling results, and I can jump back at any point in time. Nick made a comment early in the conversation today and was saying, you want to be able to trace back through and say, we predicted XYZ would happen. If that was something that happened a year or 2 or 3 years ago, you're going to want to sort of start automatically cataloging all of this history. So you can say, this is the exact estimator that was used. This is what went into it. And I can pull that up really quickly and be able to demonstrate exactly what we were talking about. So the traceability in the modeling. And here it's just manifested in just a pretty simple list. The last one at the top, you can see it was deployed. And we know the exact moment when we deployed that model, the results of that model as well. So Nick, anything to add on this one?
No, I think when something's deployed, it means it's available inside the various dashboards and things that our customers are using. So they choose when to say something's ready for that.
Yeah, and we don't like that never happens automatically. Someone hits a button, someone makes a decision. That decision, the name and the date of that moment is captured. There's some interesting conversation going on in the chat about what could you use, what might you not want to use. I think the important question is defining that moment of deployment and what you're going to do as an organization to support that data, the results of a model being released. So you could generate, lots of models internally and not deploy them, and you can learn from them. And I think that's okay. But the moment you push something out is the moment you need to be ready to sort of, backtrack on all of this. So, anyway, I'm moving on.
Yeah. I think bias detection is interesting because I think Rob Schutz is asking about sharing de-identified ATS data with university. So there's interest in bias detection. So we have inside one model. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the bias detection.
Yeah, so what's going on here is when you're making a model, you're feeding in some training data into that model, and what you want to look for is you want to do tests on that training data to see if there are disparate impacts within the data. And so the sort of, the classic fear here, and it's justified, is that if your organization historically has not promoted certain groups of people and you're building a model for promotion, or not hired certain groups of people and you're building a model to essentially automate your decisions from the past, you're very likely going to create a machine that has that bias embedded within it. And so whatever training data you feed into a model, you want to have the ability to run, in this case, a fairness metric, for example. You can run a disparate impact metric on that incoming data. I think that's a scary thing for organizations to do, but also it doesn't mean, like, if a data set had disparate impact in it, it doesn't mean your entire organization is faulty and you're being biased in every decision. It means that specific cut of data that you are about to use to build a predictive model had disparate impact in it. And so you either don't want to use it or you want to employ some debiasing techniques on that data, which are fairly complicated and beyond the scope of this conversation. But it is still possible you could use that data, but you'd want to essentially scrub the bias out of it using some advanced techniques. Or don't use the data at all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
go ahead, Nick.
interesting. It's interesting too because it's a larger conversation for too large for today, but a conversation that we have. So it's a conversation that we do have this conversation with our customers about exactly what techniques are used, and it's all transparent to them. So just to be really clear, we don't deflect any of these types of items. And again, we're trying to, this is us living by example. So it's not, not pitching a product, we're pitching a way of building and building products that are used by all of you.
Yeah, and those features, they don't have to be embedded in software. It's enough to have a process around it. We're just kind of showing you an example of what you might see in an internal process or in a piece of software that gives you the confidence that these things are happening. So let's move to the next one. This one's fun, and it kind of dovetails in. If you weren't at HR Tech for Nick's talk, what was fun is it was a little bit of a throwing down the gauntlet moment, of if you're out there shopping for some technology, you should just ask people, completely innocently, hey, can you tell me exactly what model is being used in your solution to give a certain prediction? I think we have let vendors get away with having really smart, geniusy people that maybe they hired from Google, and they're just doing amazing kind of work, and you can just kind of get their predictions on demand in a piece of software. But it's kind of like, it's sort of their secret, internal super brainy stuff. And you don't really get to see that as a customer. And that shouldn't be the case. So what we're looking at here, this is the modeling report. And what it's telling you is we made a prediction. There was a target variable up on the right. That's what we were predicting. The stuff down the left and in the middle column, this is where we're saying, this is the exact type of algorithm we use. We used a random forest on your data to produce this particular predictive value. We used a certain method to select features. We selected 15 features. We also did something called upsampling on the data to balance out the classes. So kind of full transparency. And then down the left are a ton of hyperparameters. What that means is the stuff that people would code in Python or R as part of building that model, a bunch of variables that they would pass in to treat the data a certain way. What's cool about an outcome like this is if you have somebody who uses Python or R, they could download the same machine learning libraries onto their computer. They could punch in all the same parameters on a copy on their side. They could feed in the same data set and get the exact same model. You could reproduce the model from this information versus just having to say, well, the actual predictive model is sort of a vendor secret. We can't just give that away. That's our sort of intellectual property. I think.
Yeah, that's that hiding behind the IP. I'm going to flip to the next slide too, Phil.
Sure.
But the hiding behind that wall of, well, it's our IP. I would say it's your IP, but it's our legal risk and reputational risk. So you're going to have to start being more transparent, is what I would demand from them. So, Phil, what do we have on this one?
Yeah, I can go through the last couple are pretty quick. We sort of kind of proving the point, but I think here, what you're seeing is a list of all of the data points that were fed into the model and what was done with them. So not just, what was the actual model and what features were selected, what was everything that was up for selection? And if it wasn't used, why wasn't it used? If it was used, was it transformed in a certain way to make that data more consumable by the algorithm? And so this is just a history of all of that. And then I think, Nick, the last one too is testing out as one example of the type of statistical work that goes into data preparation for models. This is just a record of all the correlations that were tested within the data, to reduce dimensionality and other things. We also have a special guest joining us. So in a moment, Nick, I'll let you introduce him. And then just to close it out in terms of examples, what you're looking at here is the results from the modeling report that tell us how well our model performed when we tested it. So we held some samples out, we tested it to see how well it performed. And this is showing precision and recall, which is one method of understanding how well a predictive model does at actually predicting reality. So recall is, does it find the people who in this case say terminated? Precision would be if it says somebody's going to terminate, what's the probability that it's right about that? we roll it into something called an F1 score to kind of evaluate the model against other possibilities. But the important part is just that you have all this data, that you could pull it up even if it was run 2 years ago, and see exactly what you did, and remember everything that was done to make a certain prediction. So
yeah, so and thanks. Taylor Clark has joined us, and again, we walked through these things for the purpose of showing you a level of transparency that we are delivering, and a level of transparency that we think you should all be demanding of all of your HR tech. I'm going to go through a couple more items and then see if there's any questions remaining. We are scheduled to end at 45 minutes after the hour. I think we can stay a little bit longer if you can. So,
or if Zoom can. I don't know if Zoom hard closes it. We'll find out.
So if you all know how to find us, if Zoom should close the door. So let me just make sure I get through these then. What is the purpose of the modeling or of the estimating that we're doing? Are we going to use it? Is it going to help our organization? Is it going to help the workforce? And then how are we going to deploy this and ensure that it's used ethically? How are we going to maintain it? So having that full plan in advance of deploying things is super important. You have to know what you're doing. So asking these questions within your team. And when I say within your org team, I mean across your HR function. I think we really have to put on a bit of a bigger hat and take that responsibility. So things to ask your HR tech vendors is, like Phil said, can you walk around in a conference and say what type of method is being used? What was the training data? How are you refreshing this and monitoring it? You say it's 95% accuracy. What do you mean by that? And can you show me those results? Or can you put me in touch, or let's say this differently, can you put the data scientist, if I'm a practitioner in an organization, my data scientist in touch with your data scientist? In our case, that conversation would be with Taylor, who's on the phone. So, and then transparency. Do you have access to review the details and the output? I'm going to go to the last page and just let you know that with Taylor's fine work is going to be featured in a white paper on ethics in people analytics, and that's going to be coming soon. And that's where we land the ship today. I'm really glad you all joined. Now, if we have any other questions, I might fish some out of previous questions, but if there's any questions we can answer, I think I see one here, which is, are all random forest models the same? Maybe I'll turn that one over to Taylor.
So not really. There are different algorithms in the hyperparameters, which are settings that influence how an algorithm behaves. So for each algorithm that you're using, whether it's a logistic regression or a cat boost or random forest or whatever it is, there's a bunch of different settings that influence how that algorithm behaves. So for a random forest, there are things like, how frequently does it split its logic in the tree-based algorithm? And yeah, thanks for pulling that up. So those are all the settings. And so what we try to do is provide all of the settings instead of just saying, hey, we used a random forest. You could actually take this and recreate the exact random forest with the training data outside of our system at the level of transparency that we have. So using a random forest from different libraries can have different behaviors as well, because they can be implemented slightly differently. So there is kind of the mathematical concept of a random forest, which is a generalization of a bunch of different settings and behaviors that work in a tree-based algorithm.
Yeah, Taylor, another question that came up, and I answered it with my perspective, but I'm interested in yours on this. And it came up earlier, is what if the model has bias? We were talking about bias detection on the output. Mm-hmm. What if a model has bias, but it's less biased than the current practices? So are we better from an ethical standpoint? Are we better deploying that model knowing it has bias, but it's less than current state?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where the human in the middle component, kind of really engaging on this content, matters, and taking the time to understand what that means, what bias means, and what better than the current state is, and how the model is going to be used. Because my response to that in general is it's immensely beneficial that we know there's bias, right? And depending on what you're doing with the algorithm and the intent of the consumption, it may be acceptable or maybe not. Obviously, we want as little bias as we can, But if we're using the system to help check recruiters from, introducing their own bias into the system, then maybe having a system that is has a little bit of bias contained in it, but is helping people be less biased, but isn't just dictatorially like writing an outcome, right? So if the outcome was who's going to get promoted, it's immensely unethical, especially if there's any bias in there at all, it's unacceptable. You could use it from a exploratory data analysis standpoint to understand, where is that bias being introduced, and kind of how are we seeing it manifest, and those things can be really valuable. So it's not a direct answer to your question, but that's where the finesse and the kind of like treating algorithms as like black magic that just solve all our problems is not really how the rubber meets the road. It's, we have to interject the humans and really think about how it's going to be used. So I guess that's my quick answer.
Yeah. And just doing a quick time check. What I brought us back to this last page, and there's a few questions in the chat. We'll try to fish out those, answer those directly with you, or possibly put them on LinkedIn when we put the recording of this session up there. So I think what we'll do is we'll close out for today. Taylor, thanks for joining. Phil, always a pleasure. And you can visit us at onemodel.co, that's .co. And we'd be happy to have a discussion about, our platform, which is built to take HR and non-HR data, put it into an analytics-ready data asset, and help you to deliver queries, reports, dashboards, storyboards, data feeds to your data lake, and allow things like Tableau and Power BI to connect to it. So that's the solution. But the data science piece that sits on top of that is what we were showing some pictures of, and it's I would contend it's world class, something that's worth looking at, and it follows all of the ethical standards that we've talked about. So from us at One Model, just want to say thank you, and we'll look forward to being in touch with you real soon.